I was wearing my dead mother's sweatpants when I opened the door to a man who could end lives with a phone call. The delivery app said, "Marco, 20 minutes, contactless, leave it at the door," but he didn't leave. He stood there in a black suit that cost more than my rent, holding my groceries like they were evidence, and his eyes weren't asking permission to come in. They were calculating how many exits I had. I should have slammed the door. Should have pretended I didn't see the gun under his jacket or recognize his face from the news 3 months ago when the FBI called him untouchable. Instead, I said the stupidest thing possible. "You forgot the eggs." He smiled. It was the smile of a man who never forgot anything. "No," he said. "I came to see if you would notice. You will feel so many emotions in this mysterious love story I'm about to tell. Please support us by clicking subscribe to the channel." My apartment smelled like chamomile tea and industrial bleach. The scent of someone who works night shifts at St. Benedict's Hospital and hasn't had a real conversation in 6 months. Not since my mother died with my hand in hers, her wedding ring cold against my palm, her last words something about forgiveness I still don't understand. Vincent Russo walked past my threshold without asking, just stepped inside like he owned the space between my heartbeat and my next breath. He set the grocery bags on my counter. The counter I'd scrubbed 3 times this week because staying still meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. I stood there in socks with holes in them, my hair in a bun that had given up 4 hours ago, and watched a man worth more than most small countries inspect my kitchen like it was a crime scene. "Do you always order at 2 a.m., Saur?" he asked, "or only when you can't sleep?" The question landed somewhere between my ribs. I could have lied. Should have lied. I'd spent 27 years learning how to make myself smaller, quieter, invisible. My father taught me that before he disappeared. My ex-boyfriend reinforced it before I learned to leave. Invisibility was survival. But Vincent Russo wasn't looking at me the way men usually did, like I was something to acquire or dismiss. He was looking at me like he recognized something tired, something familiar. "I work nights," I said. "Sleep days. It's easier this way." Easier than what? Than people. He didn't laugh. Didn't judge, just nodded like I'd said something true instead of something pathetic. Then he opened my fridge, and I should have been angry, should have told him to get out. But I was too shocked by the audacity, and removed the milk carton I'd forgotten about. The expired one. The one I kept meaning to throw away. He replaced it with the fresh one from my delivery, and the gesture was so unexpectedly gentle that I forgot how to breathe. "You've been ordering from the same grocery service for 6 months, he said. "Always tipping exactly 22%. Always adding a note that says, 'Thank you for being careful.' Most people don't see delivery workers as human. You do. How do you know that?" He turned to face me fully, and I saw it then. The exhaustion behind the expensive suit. The weight of a man who carried violence like other people carried briefcases. Because someone noticed. And that made me notice you. The apartment suddenly felt too small, too warm. I pressed my back against the wall, the same wall where my mother used to lean when the chemo made her dizzy, and tried to understand what was happening. Who noticed me? Someone who shouldn't have. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now. We stood there in my kitchen that barely fit 2 people, surrounded by the evidence of my small life, the medical textbooks I couldn't afford to replace, the houseplant I kept forgetting to water, the photo of my mother I'd turned face down because looking at it still felt like drowning. Vincent Russo moved toward the door, and I thought that was it. Thought I'd imagined the whole surreal encounter. Thought I could go back to being invisible. Then he stopped. "You take care of everyone else," he said without turning around. "Who takes care of you?" My throat closed. No one had asked me that. Not once. Not when my mother got sick. Not when I worked triple shifts to pay for treatments insurance wouldn't cover. Not when I came home to an empty apartment and realized I'd become the kind of person who ordered groceries at 2 a.m. just to have a notification on my phone, just to feel like someone, somewhere, knew I existed. "I take care of myself," I whispered. "No," he said, turning to look at me with eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. "You survive yourself. That's different." He opened my door, stepped into the hallway where the fluorescent lights hummed like dying insects, and delivered the line that would change everything. "From now on, no one touches you." It wasn't a question, wasn't a request. It was a promise wrapped in a threat, wrapped in something I didn't have a name for yet. "I don't understand." "You will." Then Vincent Russo walked away, leaving my groceries neatly arranged on my counter, my expired milk in the trash, and my entire world tilted 15 degrees off its axis. I closed the door, locked it, checked it twice the way I always did. Then I opened the grocery bag and found everything I'd ordered, plus one thing I hadn't. A carton of eggs. Perfect. Unbroken. Waiting. I sat on my kitchen floor in my dead mother's sweatpants and cried for the first time in 6 months, holding a carton of eggs like it was the most precious thing I'd ever been given. Because maybe it was. Because someone had noticed I existed. And in a life built on invisibility, being seen felt like the most dangerous gift of all. The car appeared on Tuesday. Not my car. That rusted Honda had died 3 months ago in a 7-Eleven parking lot. And I'd been taking the subway ever since, packed between strangers who smelled like coffee and resignation. But Tuesday morning, there it was, a silver sedan parked in my assigned spot, keys in my mailbox with no note, no explanation, just the weight of them in my palm like a question I didn't know how to answer. I left them on my kitchen counter, didn't touch the car, didn't acknowledge whatever game Vincent Russo thought he was playing. By Wednesday, I noticed the man in the dark sedan across the street. He didn't hide, just sat there during my shifts, a shadow with a phone and patience, watching my building like it might disappear if he blinked. By Thursday, my coworker Jenny cornered me in the supply closet. "Someone paid off your hospital bill," she said, eyes wide with the kind of excitement that comes from other people's drama. "The one from when your mom was in ICU. Just cleared the whole thing. Do you have a secret benefactor or something?" I didn't answer. Just grabbed the gauze I needed and walked away, feeling my invisibility dissolve like sugar in hot water. I lasted until Friday. I tracked Vincent down to a restaurant in Lower Manhattan that didn't have a sign, didn't have a website, the kind of place you only knew about if you were supposed to know about it. The host looked at me like I was a stain on his marble floor until I said Vincent's name. Then his expression shifted, not to welcome, but to recognition, to fear. Vincent was at a corner table, alone, reading something on his phone with the focus of a man defusing a bomb. He looked up when I approached, and there was no surprise in his eyes. Like he'd been waiting. "You can't do this," I said. "Sit down, Maya." "I'm not." "Sit down." I sat. Not because he commanded it, but because my legs were shaking and I didn't want him to see. The restaurant smelled like old money and older secrets. Leather and wine and something metallic underneath, like the ghosts of negotiations that ended badly. Vincent pushed a glass of water toward me. I didn't drink it. "You're fixing my life without asking," I said. "My car. My bills. That man watching my apartment like I'm a suspect. He's not watching you. He's protecting you." "From what?" Vincent set his phone down, folded his hands. The gesture was so controlled it felt violent. 3 weeks ago, someone accessed your delivery account. They tracked your address, your schedule, your patterns. Every grocery order you placed became a map of your existence. The restaurant tilted slightly. I gripped the table edge. Who? Someone who knows I notice details. Someone who wants to prove they can reach what I protect. I don't need protection. I don't even know you. "No," he said quietly, "but they think you do. And in my world, perception is the same as truth." I wanted to leave, wanted to walk out of that restaurant and back into my invisible life where the only person who could hurt me was myself. But my body wouldn't move, because some part of me, the part that had learned to recognize danger before it showed its teeth, knew Vincent was telling the truth. "I can handle myself," I said. "I'm sure you can. You've been handling yourself your whole life." The words landed like he knew me. Like he'd read the file of my existence and understood all the redacted parts. "Then let me keep doing that." "I will. After the threat is eliminated." "And if I refuse your help?" He leaned back, and for the first time, I saw something close to respect in his expression. "Then you refuse it. I won't force protection on you, Maya. But I also won't let you die because you're too proud to accept it." I stood to leave. Made it 3 steps before he spoke again. "Your mother wore a ring. Silver band, small diamond. You buried her with it." I froze, turned slowly. "How do you know that?" "Because the person tracking you knows it too. They know what matters to you. And they're very good at using those things as weapons." My hands were numb. My breath came in shallow pulls. Vincent stood, moved toward me with the careful approach of someone who'd learned not to corner wounded things. "Go home," he said. "Think about it. But know this. You were chosen as a message, and messages in my world don't get delivered gently." I left the restaurant. Took the subway home because I still wouldn't touch that car. Let myself into my apartment and tried to pretend the last hour hadn't happened. Then I saw it. Slipped under my door while I was gone. A photograph. Me. Walking into St. Benedict's yesterday morning, coffee in hand, exhausted smile for the security guard I always greet. I flipped it over with shaking hands. On the back, written in red ink that looked too much like blood, "Tell him we remember his promises." The photo slipped from my fingers, landed face up on my floor, my own image staring back at me like evidence of a crime I didn't commit. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You were chosen as a message." Vincent arrived within the hour. I didn't call him, didn't text. But when the knock came, 3 precise raps that sounded nothing like a neighbor or a delivery, I already knew who was standing on the other side of my door. He looked at the photo on my floor, didn't pick it up, just stared at it with the stillness of a man calculating trajectories, consequences, the exact weight of blood. "Pack a bag," he said. "Enough for 3 days. I'm not leaving." "Yes, you are." "You can't just—" "Maya." He said my name like it was a fact, not a request. "They know where you sleep, where you work, the coffee shop you stop at on Thursdays when the regular shift nurse brings donuts. They know everything because they've been watching longer than I have." My throat closed around words I couldn't shape. The apartment suddenly felt like a trap I'd built myself. Every familiar corner now evidence of how easily I could be found. 3 days? He said softer. "Then we figure out something permanent." I packed in silence. Underwear, scrubs, my mother's sweater that still smelled like her lavender lotion. Vincent stood by the window, not watching me, just watching the street below with the focus of someone who saw threats in the spaces between shadows. The drive took 20 minutes. We didn't speak. His car was the kind that hummed instead of roared, all leather and silence and the faint smell of cedar. I pressed my forehead against the window and watched Brooklyn blur into Manhattan, the city transforming from my world into his. The penthouse in Tribeca had windows that swallowed the skyline whole. I stood in the center of all that glass and money and space, feeling like a smudge on an otherwise perfect photograph. Vincent's men, 2 of them, silent as tombstones, positioned themselves at exits I hadn't even noticed. They looked through me the way people look through hospital walls, necessary but invisible. "You'll be safe here," Vincent said. "I'll be trapped here." "It's not the same thing, isn't it?" He moved to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city like it owed him something. Maybe it did. Maybe everything owed him something. And that's what power was. The world rearranging itself around your gravity. "I had a brother," he said quietly. "Younger, smarter, better at seeing the good in people than I ever was." I waited. The apartment held its breath. He trusted someone he shouldn't have. Made a deal that seemed fair, seemed safe. They killed him in a parking garage in Queens. He was 23. The grief in his voice was old but not healed, like a scar that still ached in cold weather. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't be. Just understand that when I say you're in danger, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being controlling. I'm trying very hard not to fail again." Something in my chest cracked open. Not love, too soon for that, but recognition. The kind that happens when you meet someone who's been carrying the same weight, just in different hands. "Okay," I said. 3 days. That night, Vincent took me somewhere I shouldn't have seen. We drove to Red Hook, where the streetlights gave up and the city's edges frayed into industrial darkness. He parked near a pier that smelled like oil and old fish and decisions you couldn't take back. 3 men were waiting. They looked like the kind of people who appeared in crime scene photos, not family albums. "Stay in the car," Vincent said. I watched through tinted glass as he approached them, watched the way they straightened, not in respect but in survival instinct. One of them pulled a knife, casual, like he was checking the time. Vincent's hand moved to his jacket, and the man dropped the blade so fast it clattered against concrete like applause. Vincent spoke. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw their effect. Saw the way violence dissolved into something sharper than fear. Saw him return to the car with bruised knuckles and empty eyes. "You didn't have to watch that," he said, starting the engine. Yes, I did. Because I needed to know. Needed to see what protection looked like when it wasn't soft or safe or anything like the fairy tales I'd stopped believing in when my father left. Back at the penthouse, Vincent brought me to his office, locked the door, set a file on the desk between us with my name printed on the tab. My hands shook when I opened it. Photos, dozens of them. Me at the hospital, me at the grocery store, me at my mother's grave in Greenwood Cemetery, kneeling in grass that was too green, placing flowers I couldn't afford. Someone had been cataloging my existence like I was a specimen, like I was research. "How long?" I asked. 4 months, maybe longer. I flipped through the evidence of my erasure. Then I reached the last page and forgot how to breathe. It was my mother, in her hospital bed, 3 weeks before she died. And written across the bottom in handwriting I recognized, handwriting that still appeared in my nightmares. She made this easy. The name beneath it, Dr. Aaron Wexler. Aaron Wexler. The name sat in my mouth like broken glass. I'd spent 2 years trying to forget it, trying to scrub it from my memory the way I scrubbed blood from hospital floors, methodically, desperately, knowing some stains never fully disappear. Vincent was watching me, waiting. He'd positioned himself across the desk like we were negotiating a treaty, but his eyes held something softer than strategy, something close to concern. "Tell me," he said. "I can't." Maya. I can't because if I say it out loud, it becomes real again. And I've worked very hard to make it unreal. He stood slowly, moved around the desk, but didn't touch me. Just stood close enough that I could feel the heat of him, the solid presence of someone who wouldn't disappear if I looked away. "He hurt you." It wasn't a question. "No," I said. Then quieter. "Not the way you mean." I closed the file because looking at my mother's face was like drowning in shallow water. Slow, inevitable, witnessed by no one who could save you. I worked at a private clinic in Manhattan 2 years ago. Mount Sinai wasn't hiring, and I had student loans that were eating me alive. Aaron was the head surgeon. Brilliant. Everyone said so. Patients loved him. Staff respected him. But he noticed me, and I thought it was flattering at first. The way he'd ask about my day, remember small details, bring me coffee exactly how I liked it. Then it became constant. He'd text at midnight asking if I'd eaten, show up at my apartment with groceries I didn't ask for, reschedule my shifts so I'd work when he worked. Vincent's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. When I told him I wasn't interested, he didn't get angry. He got patient, like I was a problem he could solve with enough time and attention. So I quit, changed my number, moved apartments. I thought that was the end. It never is with men like that. No, it never is. I stood, needing distance from the file, from the memories, from the way Vincent was looking at me like I was something breakable he didn't know how to hold. He wasn't just a doctor, Vincent said. He was a fixer. People in my world, people who couldn't go to regular hospitals, they went to him. Gunshot wounds, overdoses, things that required discretion. You're saying he worked for criminals? I'm saying he worked for everyone, including my enemies. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. The windows that had seemed so expansive now felt like they were closing in, trapping us in this moment of terrible understanding. "He's using me to get to you," I said. "Or using me to get to you. I haven't decided which is worse." Vincent moved to the window, and I saw it then, the weight he carried, not just of power, but of protection. Every person he tried to save was another potential failure, another brother bleeding out in a parking garage. "I need to know what he did," Vincent said to the glass. "All of it." "Why? So you can kill him? So I can stop him?" "That's not an answer." He turned, and his eyes held something I hadn't seen before. Vulnerability, raw and unexpected as a wound. "I have 3 rules," he said. "Don't lie to me. Don't put yourself in danger without telling me. And don't ever think you're alone in this." The rules settled between us like furniture we'd have to navigate around. And if I can't follow them, then we're both in trouble. I walked toward him, drawn by something I didn't have a name for yet. Something that felt like recognition. Like two people who'd learned the same hard language finally finding someone who spoke it fluently. I have one rule, I said. Tell me. Don't treat me like I'm yours to protect. Treat me like I'm someone you trust to protect myself. He studied me for a long moment, and I watched his expression shift from commander to something more human, more uncertain. That's the hardest rule you could have given me. I know. We stood in his living room with Manhattan glittering below us like broken promises, and something changed in the space between our breathing. Not love. Not yet. But the foundation of it, the terrifying realization that this person saw you, all of you, and hadn't looked away. He visited your mother, Vincent said quietly, 3 weeks before she died. Do you remember what they talked about? He brought flowers, spoke to her privately. I thought he was being kind. He was gathering information, learning what mattered to you so he could use it later. Nausea rose in my throat. The memory of Aaron's smile in that hospice room, my mother's weak voice thanking him for his thoughtfulness, my own gratitude for someone caring enough to visit. The ring, I whispered. He knew about the ring because she told him. Vincent's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire body went rigid. What? He turned the screen toward me. A photo. My mother's grave, fresh dirt. And lying on top of the headstone, her wedding ring, gleaming in moonlight like an accusation. The ring was impossible. I'd held my mother's hand in the funeral home, her skin already cold, already belonging to something that wasn't her anymore. I'd slid that ring onto her finger myself, the silver band worn thin from 40 years of wearing, the small diamond that caught light like a promise my father broke when he left. I'd watched them close the casket, watched them lower her into earth that smelled like rain and endings. That ring was supposed to be 6 feet underground in Greenwood Cemetery, wrapped around a finger that would never feel warmth again. Vincent made a call, then another. His voice was low, controlled, the kind of calm that came before storms. I sat on his couch that probably cost more than my yearly salary and tried to remember how to breathe in a world where graves got robbed and dead. Mothers couldn't rest. The casket wasn't disturbed, he said, ending the third call. No evidence of excavation. Which means someone took it before the burial. The realization hit like cold water. I was back in that funeral home, numb with grief, signing papers I didn't read, accepting condolences from people whose faces blurred together. Aaron had been there. I remembered now. He'd stood in the back, hands folded, expression appropriately somber. I'd thought he was paying respects. He was stealing. He visited her 3 weeks before she died, I said, the words coming faster now as memory reconstructed itself. He brought flowers, chrysanthemums. My mother loved chrysanthemums. They talked alone for almost an hour. I thought she needed privacy, thought maybe she was sharing something personal with someone who'd understand the medical reality of what was happening to her body. Vincent sat beside me, close but not touching, giving me space to break apart. What did she tell him? Everything. About my father leaving when I was 9. About raising me alone on a teacher's salary. About how proud she was that I became a nurse, that I chose to help people the way no one helped us. She told him about her wedding ring, how it was the only thing of value she owned, how she wanted me to have it but I insisted she be buried with it because it belonged with her. My voice cracked on the last word. Vincent's hand found mine, and I let him hold it because the alternative was shattering completely. He recorded it, Vincent said. Every word, every vulnerability. He spent that hour building a file on how to destroy you. The apartment was too quiet. Even the city below seemed to be holding its breath. Why? I whispered. Why go through all this? I'm nobody. I work night shifts and eat cereal for dinner, and my biggest accomplishment is keeping a houseplant alive for 3 months. You told him no. For men like Aaron, that's unforgivable. I pulled my hand from his, stood, needed movement, or I'd calcify into grief. The window showed me a city that kept spinning while my world stopped. All those lit windows holding people who weren't being hunted by their own past. I need to see him. No. Vincent. No. He stood too. And his voice held an edge I hadn't heard before. That's exactly what he wants. You, vulnerable and emotional, walking into whatever trap he's prepared. Then what do I do? Wait here while he defiles my mother's memory. While he plays with her ring like it's a chess piece? You let me handle it. Like you handled those men on the pier. Like you'll handle him with violence and power and all the things that make you exactly what he thinks you are. The words landed between us like grenades. Vincent's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes dimmed. You don't know what I am? Then tell me. I'm someone who keeps people alive, even when they don't want to be kept. We stood in his living room like boxers in our corners, both knowing the fight wasn't with each other but not knowing how else to release the pressure building in our chests. Vincent's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and I watched color drain from his face. What? He turned the screen toward me. A video. Thumbnail frozen on my face. Younger, devastated. Sitting on my bathroom floor the night after my mother's funeral. I was holding a bottle of her pain medication, the hydrocodone I'd taken from the hospital, the pills I'd given her those last terrible weeks when insurance wouldn't cover enough and watching her suffer felt like dying myself. The timestamp in the corner, 48 hours until upload. Below it, a message. Bring her to me, or everyone sees what kind of nurse she really is. The video was 47 seconds of my complete destruction. I watched it 3 times on Vincent's phone, each viewing like swallowing glass. There I was, 25 years old, drunk on grief and cheap wine, sitting on my bathroom floor at 3 a.m. talking to my mother's ghost, confessing, sobbing, admitting I'd stolen hydrocodone from the hospital pharmacy, not for myself, but for her, because watching her scream through breakthrough pain while insurance companies debated coverage felt like complicity in torture. Aaron had been there that night. I'd called him in desperation, thinking he'd understand as a doctor, as someone who'd seen suffering. He'd sat with me for an hour, held my hand, told me it was natural to feel guilty, that I'd done what any loving daughter would do. He'd recorded every word. If that goes public, I whispered, I lose my license, my career, everything I built from the wreckage of losing her. Vincent took the phone back, his jaw set in that way that meant he was already moving pieces I couldn't see. It won't go public. You can't promise that. Watch me. He made calls, not frantic, but surgical. Each conversation brief, coded, efficient. I listened to him dismantle a threat using nothing but his voice and the weight of favors owed, debts collected, power that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew it was there. Within 2 hours, Aaron Wexler's medical license was under investigation, his hospital privileges suspended pending review, his accounts frozen by financial institutions that suddenly found irregularities worth exploring. I watched Vincent work and felt something close to terror, not of him, of what he could do, of how easily a person could be erased from their own life when someone with enough power decided they should disappear. Stop, I said. He looked up from his laptop, surprised. This is what protection looks like. Maya, you wanted me to handle it. I wanted you to help me, not destroy him. What's the difference? The difference is I have to live with who I become in this, and I can't become someone who solves problems by erasing people. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, something more complicated, like I'd reminded him of a version of himself he'd lost somewhere along the way. He won't stop, Vincent said quietly. Men like Aaron don't stop until they're forced to. Then we force him legally. We do this the right way. There is no right way in my world. Then maybe I need to use mine. I called the police, made a formal report about the stalking, the harassment, the theft of my mother's ring from the funeral home, gave them dates, documentation, the file Vincent had compiled. The detective who took my statement was young, earnest, the kind of cop who still believed the system worked. His name was Detective Marcus Chen. He listened carefully, took notes, promised to investigate. When he asked about Vincent, I lied smoothly. He's a friend, someone I trust. Detective Chen didn't believe me. I could see it in the way his pen paused over his notepad, the slight narrowing of his eyes. But he had no evidence of anything except that I was telling the truth about Aaron. As he left, he handed me his card. If you need help getting out of something, he said carefully, call me directly. I took the card. Vincent watched from across the room. Silent. 2 days later, Detective Marcus Chen was found dead in his apartment. Single gunshot wound to the head. The scene staged to look like suicide. Gun in hand, note about job stress, no signs of struggle. The news report called it a tragedy. Another officer lost to the invisible wounds of the job. Vincent's people had been asking about him the day before. I stood in the penthouse watching the news coverage and felt my entire moral architecture collapse. The detective's photo filled the screen, young, smiling, wearing his dress uniform. He had a wife, 2 kids, a dog named Murphy they'd rescued from a shelter. He'd tried to help me, and now he was dead. "Did you do this?" I asked without turning around. Vincent's silence was its own answer. "Did you order this?" "No. But your people?" "My people protect what's mine." Sometimes that means asking questions that make people nervous. I didn't tell them to kill him, Maya, but I also didn't stop them from making sure he wasn't a threat. I finally looked at him, saw the man I'd been falling for, and the monster he might be, overlapping like a double exposure. "What's the difference?" He had no answer. Or maybe the answer was that there was no difference. That in his world, protection and elimination were just different words for the same violence. I walked to the bedroom, locked the door, and made a decision that would change everything. I was done being protected. I left before dawn, not dramatically, not with a note or a confrontation or any of the closure that would make this feel like an ending instead of an escape. I just waited until Vincent's breathing deepened in the room down the hall, until his security detail changed shifts and there was a 7-minute gap in their rotation, and I walked out wearing yesterday's scrubs and carrying nothing but my phone and the detective's card. The city at 5 a.m. belonged to people like me, the ones leaving, the ones running, the ones who'd learned that survival meant knowing when to disappear. I had a plan. Not a good one, but plans born from desperation rarely were. My nursing school friend Rebecca lived in Seattle now, working at Swedish Medical Center, living a life so far removed from mafia bosses and surveillance and graves that got robbed that it felt like fiction. I'd called her 2 days ago, voice steady, asking about transfer opportunities. She'd been thrilled. Said they were hiring, said I could stay with her until I found a place, said it sounded like I needed a fresh start. She had no idea how desperately I needed to start fresh, to scrub Vincent Russo and Aaron Wexler and all of this from my skin like contamination. I had a bus ticket for next Wednesday, an interview scheduled for Thursday, a future that looked nothing like the past 3 weeks. But first, I had to end this. Aaron's temporary apartment was in Murray Hill, the kind of building where doormen didn't ask questions if you looked like you belonged. I walked in wearing confidence I didn't feel, took the elevator to the 9th floor, and knocked on 9C like I was expected. He answered in a bathrobe, barefoot, smiling. "Maya. I wondered when you'd come." The apartment smelled like expensive coffee and old obsession. Aaron gestured for me to enter, and every survival instinct I had screamed to run. But I'd spent my whole life running from men who thought they owned pieces of me. My father who left, my ex who stayed too long, Vincent who protected me into a cage. I was done running. "We need to talk," I said. "Please, sit." I remained standing. He poured himself coffee, offered me some. I declined. We stood in his living room like chess pieces waiting for someone to make the first move. "The video," I said. "The ring. All of it stops now." "Does it?" "I'll give you what you want." His eyes lit up with something between triumph and hunger. "And what do I want, Maya?" "Acknowledgement. You want me to admit that I felt something for you once. That your attention mattered. That I noticed you the way you noticed me." He set his coffee down, moved closer. I held my ground even as my heart tried to escape my chest. "Did you feel something?" I looked at him, really looked at him. Saw the brilliant surgeon who'd once made me laugh in the break room. Saw the man who'd brought my mother flowers. Saw all the small kindnesses that had masked something broken underneath. Something that confused possession with love. "I pitied you," I said quietly. "I still do. Because you're so desperate to be seen that you've built your entire identity around forcing people to look at you. That's not love, Aaron. That's loneliness wearing a mask." His smile cracked, then shattered. "You think you're better than me? You. Who stole medication for your dying mother? Who's fucking a criminal to feel protected? I think I'm honest about my damage. You're still pretending yours is devotion." I pulled out my phone, stopped the recording I'd started before knocking. 43 minutes of Aaron confessing to the stalking, the forgery, the blackmail. His voice admitting he'd hired men to track me, to threaten Vincent's operations, to create chaos so he could be the one to offer rescue. "It's over," I said. His face transformed into something I'd never seen before. Pure, distilled rage. You think you've won? You think recording me changes anything? The door burst open. Two men I didn't recognize grabbed me from behind. Not Vincent's men, not anyone's men I knew. Just violence in human form, efficient and cold. Aaron's smile returned, but it was different now. Broken. Desperate. Vincent has a choice to make, he said to me. To them, to the universe. Your life, or the truth about what happened to that detective. I'm giving him 1 hour to decide which matters more. The warehouse in Queens smelled like rust and broken promises. They'd zip-tied my wrists behind my back, sat me on a metal chair bolted to concrete, and left me alone with my thoughts and the sound of water dripping somewhere in the darkness. I'd stopped counting minutes after the first hour. Time moved differently when you were waiting to find out if your life was a bargaining chip someone would actually cash in. Aaron had miscalculated one crucial thing. He thought I was Vincent's weakness. But Vincent Russo hadn't built an empire by being predictable. He'd built it by being 3 steps ahead of people who thought they were playing chess when he'd already won at a game they didn't know existed. The warehouse door opened, not with a crash, but with the quiet confidence of someone who'd already secured every exit, every variable, every possible outcome. Vincent walked in alone. Behind him, flanked by 2 federal agents, was Aaron, in handcuffs, looking like a man watching his entire reality collapse in real time. The men holding me released their grip immediately. One of them had the decency to look ashamed as he cut the zip ties from my wrists. My hands were numb, fingers tingling as blood flow returned, but I barely noticed because I was trying to understand what I was seeing. You recorded him, Vincent said, and it wasn't a question. It was confirmation of something he'd already known, already used, already turned into the weapon that would end this. How did you... I've had someone monitoring your phone since the moment you left. Not to control you. To protect you from yourself. He moved closer, and I saw what the last 3 hours had cost him. The carefully controlled expression couldn't quite hide the fear underneath, the barely contained terror of someone who'd come very close to losing something irreplaceable. Aaron hired these men to take you, Vincent continued, his voice cold and factual, the tone of someone presenting evidence in a courtroom. He paid them with money he embezzled from his medical practice. He also paid someone to kill Detective Chen when the detective started asking questions about his connection to certain criminal enterprises, including mine. Aaron's face had gone the color of old paper. The federal agents held him tighter as he tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to spin one more story. The recording you made, Vincent said to me, gave us enough to get a warrant. What we found in his apartment was enough to build a case for stalking, harassment, blackmail, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. The detective's death wasn't suicide, and Aaron was sloppy enough to keep proof of the payment. I stood on shaking legs, and Vincent was there immediately, his hand at my elbow, steadying me without claiming me. You set this up, I said. You knew I'd go to him. I hoped you wouldn't, but I prepared for the possibility that you would, because you're brave and stubborn and incapable of letting other people fight your battles. So yes, I had someone monitoring your phone. And when I heard what was happening, I made a choice. What choice? To trust that you were strong enough to get what we needed, and then to make sure you'd survive it. Aaron screamed something then, incoherent and desperate, but the federal agents were already leading him away. His voice echoed through the warehouse until a door slammed, and there was only silence and the sound of my breathing and Vincent's. The video, I said, the one of me. Destroyed. Along with every copy, every file, every piece of leverage he had. You're free, Maya. The word landed in my chest like something both precious and terrifying. Free. I'd been chasing that word my whole life. Free from my father's abandonment, my mother's illness, my own guilt and shame, and the constant weight of trying to be invisible enough to be safe. You could have told me, I said, that you were protecting me even when I ran. I could have. But you needed to believe you were doing it yourself, that you had the power, the agency, the ability to save yourself. And you did. You got the recording. You faced him alone. You were magnificent. The praise felt like sunlight after years of darkness. But there was something I needed to know, something that would determine if I could stay, or if I had to keep running towards Seattle and a life that looked nothing like this. The detective, I said quietly. Did you have anything to do with his death? Vincent met my eyes without flinching. No. My people asked questions about him because that's what they do when someone new enters your orbit. They made him nervous, but they didn't kill him. Aaron did that, through a hired intermediary, because the detective was getting too close to discovering Aaron's involvement in medical fraud and illegal operations. It took us 2 days to find the proof, but we found it. I studied his face, looking for the lie, for the manipulation, for any sign that he was telling me what I wanted to hear instead of what was true. But all I saw was exhaustion and honesty, and a man who'd learned that the only way to keep someone was to give them the freedom to leave. Take me home, I said. The penthouse? No, my apartment. The one that smells like chamomile and bleach and all the small ways I've learned to survive. Vincent drove me back to Brooklyn in silence. The sun was rising over the East River, painting the city in shades of gold and pink, and I watched it through the window like I was seeing it for the first time. When we pulled up to my building, he didn't turn off the engine. Just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, waiting. I have something for you, he said finally. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a plane ticket to Seattle, dated for next Wednesday. A letter of recommendation from St. Benedict's Hospital. Keys to an apartment already leased in my name, first and last month's rent paid, a check for enough money to start over anywhere I wanted. You want it out, he said quietly. I'm giving it to you. No strings, no expectations. Just the freedom to choose who you want to be and where you want to be her. I looked at the ticket, at the carefully planned escape route he'd built for me even while hoping I wouldn't use it, at the evidence that he loved me enough to let me go. Then I set it on the dashboard. I don't want to be saved, Vincent. I never did. I wanted to be seen. And you saw me, all of me. The broken parts and the strong parts and the parts I didn't even know existed. You saw me, and you didn't try to fix me or change me or make me smaller so I'd fit more easily into your life. What are you saying? I'm saying I choose this. You. Us. Whatever this is. Not because I'm trapped or scared or have nowhere else to go, but because for the first time in my life, I want something dangerous and complicated and real. We didn't kiss. Didn't make promises we weren't sure we could keep. We just sat in his car while Brooklyn woke up around us and I felt like myself for the first time in years. Not the invisible girl. Not the grieving daughter. Not the woman always running from the next threat. Just Maya. Seen, known, free. 6 months later, I still order groceries online. Sometimes Vincent delivers them himself, still wearing suits that cost more than most people's rent, still looking at me like I'm the most interesting thing in his carefully controlled world. And I always check for the eggs. They're always there. Perfect. Unbroken. Waiting. If you made it to the end of this story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from, and click the yellow bell to subscribe to the channel and support us. Keep the adventure going by clicking on the suggested video on your screen.